Welcome to the Debunkers podcast. Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take complex topics and distill them into surprising facts and essential insights. Today, we're plunging into the fascinating and often contested world of global digital influence and soft power. That elusive ability to attract and co-opt rather than coerce.
It really is. It's a landscape profoundly shaped by competing visions for how digital technology should be governed. And ultimately, who holds the power to shape information and perceptions online?
That's right. Our mission today is to unpack this intricate web for you. We'll explore China's evolving digital charm offensive, examine how the United States is grappling with, well, its own slipping appeal, dive into the contentious world of platforms like TikTok and its alleged algorithmic manipulation, and finally, look at how the European Union and the Global South are attempting to carve out their own paths in this digital struggle.
Yeah, and we've pulled from a really rich stack of sources. We're talking academic reports analyzing soft power dynamics, detailed examinations of social media platform structures, their impact, and international policy papers on digital governance. It's truly a comprehensive look at a critical issue shaping our world.
Okay, let's start with the big picture shift then. For decades, the United States has arguably been the global leader in soft power, right? Drawing people in with democratic ideals, economic strength, tech innovation, vibrant culture, the whole package. But according to our sources, that landscape is undergoing a profound transformation.
It really is. And what's fascinating here is how China is finding unexpected success in cultivating a cool image. And it's not through traditional, what our sources call turgid party propaganda, which frankly used to fall flat. Instead, its success seems built on bottom-up cultural phenomena and technological prowess, seemingly independent of overt state control.
Interesting. So not top-down directives, but things that genuinely resonate. Like what? Give us some examples.
Absolutely. We're talking about charismatic Western live streamers. Think iShowSpeed. He showcases China's history, friendly people, advanced tech, all with this genuine awe. His "China's different, bro!" exclamation, delivered to 38 million followers. That carries more weight than any official press release could, you know.
Oh, 38 million, yeah.
And beyond just viral videos, you've got Chinese cultural products, video games like Genshin Impact or Black Myth Wukong, steeped in Chinese folklore, appealing to millions outside Mandarin-speaking spheres. Then there's the tech side.
Yeah.
Chinese electric vehicles, consumer drones, AI breakthroughs like DeepSeek. They all project this image of a technologically advanced, innovative nation. And this kind of organic endorsement, amplified by platforms like TikTok, it really taps into a youth demographic.
Yeah.
They seem less concerned with political narratives, maybe, more interested in cultural vibrancy, technological innovation.
Okay, so while China is kind of fine-tuning this digital appeal, what's happening on the flip side? Our sources paint a pretty concerning picture of the U.S., suggesting it's somehow undermining its own global appeal. How's that playing out?
Well, historically, American higher education, think Harvard, institutions like that, they've been unparalleled magnets for global talent. Symbols of intellectual freedom, open discourse, you know.
Right, the classic soft power draw.
Exactly. These universities embody the promise of meritocracy, the free exchange of ideas, core tenets of American exceptionalism. However, in recent times, Harvard and other elite universities have faced intense political scrutiny, intervention even, highly publicized congressional hearings. University presidents aggressively questioned on free speech, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism.
Yeah, I remember seeing those.
Intense.
Very. And it included threats of defunding, direct political pressure.
That's a powerful point. But surely there's another side to this in the reports. Any counter-arguments or efforts to maybe push back against this trend?
Well, the challenge, as our sources highlight, is perception. When a government appears to dictate terms of academic discourse, or when politics seem to override academic freedom, institutional autonomy, it sends a profoundly damaging message globally.
I see. Think about it from the perspective of aspiring students, scholars worldwide. They once saw American universities as these bastions of, unfettered intellectual pursuit. These actions, they cast a shadow of doubt.
Right.
And polls actually suggest global attitudes are warming towards China, while America's popularity has, in some respects, dipped. And the sources argue this isn't solely external factors, it's also due to internal actions that seem to contradict the very values the U.S. champions abroad. Counter efforts are definitely discussed in policy circles, but changing that public perception, that's a harder ship to turn.
That's a fascinating and, sobering assessment. And speaking of platforms reaching global youth, let's turn our attention to TikTok. Prime example of China's viral soft power, perhaps. But digging into the sources, there's a lot going on behind the scenes with its ownership structure, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. What's crucial to understand here is ByteDance's corporate structure. The parent company is incorporated in the Cayman Islands, which is, common practice for Chinese companies seeking foreign investment. However, it uses something called a variable interest entity, or VIE structure.
A VIE structure. Okay, what does that actually mean?
It means that while ByteDance Ltd, the Cayman entity, controls operations and profits, it doesn't directly own the crucial Chinese entities, like Beijing ByteDance Technology.
Ah, okay. So it's a bit like an elaborate financial workaround then. What's the practical implication?
Precisely. The actual ownership and control of ByteDance's critical assets in China lie with Chinese nationals. This is primarily to comply with local regulations restricting foreign control in certain sectors, so investors in the Cayman entity. They hold stakes in an overseas company that operates through contractual arrangements with the Chinese entity, not direct ownership. And even TikTok's CEO, Liang Rubo, he's a Singapore national, but the majority ownership of the entity that actually owns TikTok and its data, that's with Chinese nationals and, by extension, the CCP.
Okay, so beyond the corporate layers, what's the actual risk here for someone listening, you or me? What are the biggest red flags when a platform with this much global reach is based, ultimately, in a country like China?
Well, the risks really stem directly from China's unique political, regulatory, and business environment. Data privacy is a big one. Remember, early 2020, TikTok came under fire when researchers found the app could access clipboard contents on iOS devices.
You do remember that, yeah. Raised a lot of eyebrows.
Exactly. And there are ongoing concerns about user data from international markets being accessible within China, which leads to scrutiny from foreign governments, naturally. Then there's the political and regulatory risk. Chinese companies, especially in tech and media, operate under close government scrutiny, always. This relationship can lead to sudden regulatory changes or enforcement actions. Think Jack Ma, founder of Alibaba. He sort of disappeared from public view for about 3 months after criticizing China's regulatory system, right after Ant Group's IPO was abruptly halted.
Stark example.
And then there's financial transparency. Chinese financial reporting standards can be less transparent than in Western markets. That can lead to irregularities. Remember Luckin Coffee? Falsified sales figures, that kind of thing.
Okay, so with all these structural issues, what really stood out for me in the sources was the evidence of actual content manipulation. Is there concrete data showing how TikTok actively shapes what users see and maybe what they believe?
That's correct, and the research here is quite compelling, yeah. It indicates a clear algorithmic bias where TikTok consistently amplifies pro-CCP content and suppresses anti-CCP narratives. Take sensitive terms like Tiananmen, Uyghur, Xinjiang. TikTok consistently had the lowest proportion of anti-China content compared to Instagram and YouTube, much lower.
How much lower are we talking?
Well, for example, only about 19.6% of Tiananmen search results on TikTok were anti-China. Compare that to 64.7% on YouTube and 56.3% on Instagram.
Wow, that's a significant difference, not just a subtle nudge. And what about other types of content? You mentioned suppression, but what gets amplified?
Right. On TikTok, pro-China and, interestingly, irrelevant content made up between 61% and 93% of search results for these sensitive terms. For Tiananmen, almost half, 45.6% of the content was irrelevant, often just scenic views of other Chinese cities, natural attractions, seemingly to just bury mentions of the massacre.
Just flood the search results.
Seems like it. For Uyghur, over 60% was irrelevant. For Xinjiang, nearly 70% irrelevant, a lot of it generic clickbait or tourist content.
Okay, but here's something interesting from the sources. Despite this suppression, the anti-China content often got more likes and views on average, right?
That's the really striking part, yes. Anti-China content generally accrued significantly higher average likes and views for most terms. But, and this is key, TikTok's algorithm uniquely favors pro-China content in terms of views per like.
Views per like. Explain that.
Okay, so for pro-China content, the average views per like was about 15.4. For anti-China content, it was only 8.2. That's an 87% difference. It suggests that even if users liked the anti-China content more, the algorithm was pushing far more views to the pro-China content, regardless of user preference.
So the algorithm overrides user engagement signals in a way.
It appears so. And this effect was significantly more pronounced on TikTok than on YouTube, according to the research.
So where is this pro-CCP content even coming from? Is it like Obvious government accounts or something more hidden?
A lot of it originates from state-linked entities, but also from what our sources call frontier influencers. These often appear to be independent individuals, often female, often China-based ethnic minority influencers. They use these idyllic portrayals of folk culture, which critics say whitewashes severe human rights abuses and cultural erasure.
Like manufactured authenticity.
Potentially. Accounts like at Arger Beauty, at Eiger Garden, they look independent, but the analysis shows signs of artificial inflation of subscribers and views. They effectively dominate the social chatter around sensitive keywords. And there's also hashtag hijacking, attaching trending hashtags to unrelated pro-China content to just flood the discourse.
It's almost unsettling to consider how pervasive this kind of influence could be. I mean, thinking about how many hours young people spend scrolling.
Yeah.
What does all this algorithmic push and pull mean for their actual beliefs, their behaviors? Is there data showing this manipulation is actually working?
Well, this isn't just about what content you see. It seems to be about a subtle, powerful form of algorithmic persuasion. And the surprising insight here is how these platforms might subtly rewire user perceptions on a massive scale. Survey data actually shows significant shifts in user attitudes towards China, indicating, well, successful indoctrination, as the source puts it.
Really? How significant?
Heavy TikTok users, those on the platform 3 or more hours daily, showed a 49% increase in positivity towards China's human rights records compared to non-users.
49%, that's huge.
It is. And these heavy users were also more likely to agree with statements like, Tiananmen Square is mostly known for being a popular travel destination. Interestingly, the same study found that use of YouTube and Instagram showed no significant relationship with users' perceptions of China's human rights record.
So it seems specific to TikTok's influence, according to this data.
That's what the findings suggest. It really underscores how algorithmic manipulation could shape perceptions on a massive scale. And it might explain why some countries, like Afghanistan, have banned TikTok, explicitly citing the need to protect youths from being misled.
This deep dive into TikTok really does reveal a larger trend, doesn't it? The increasing sophistication of digital censorship and influence globally. Let's explore how China and Russia are framed as innovators in this space.
China is definitely seen as the premier innovator here. They have the most advanced tools, the deepest censorship ecosystem. They recognized the internet's potential and its perceived threat very early on. Started implementing measures decades ago, creating the Great Firewall.
Right.
Russia, while also an innovator, has largely learned from China. They even hosted the founder of China's Great Firewall, apparently, and emulated techniques for blocking Western media sites.
So what are the practical tools they use? Beyond just blocking sites, how do they actually control the digital landscape day to day?
It's a multi-pronged approach. Institutionally, both countries use intentionally vague legislation. This gives wide latitude to regulatory bodies. China's counterterrorism laws, for instance, have implications for digital content. Russia introduced laws like the Foreign Agents Law to target journalists and media outlets receiving foreign funding. Often leads to fines, harassment.
Vague laws for broad application.
Exactly. And then you have the regulatory bodies themselves. China has the Cyberspace Administration of China, the C, oversees everything, reports directly to Xi Jinping. Russia has Roskomnadzor, the FSB. They engage in electronic surveillance enforcement.
And technologically, what are the tools?
Technologically, they use direct content, targeting, blocking accounts, keyword filtering, even full internet shutdowns in some regions or times, but also more sophisticated software and hardware censorship tools, things like DDoS attacks.
Distributed denial of service, right, to knock sites offline.
Yep. Also VPN blocking to stop people bypassing controls, and deep packet inspection, DPI. That allows them to scrutinize the actual content of data packets, not just where they're going. It's quite invasive.
So it's not just about what they actively block, but also about creating an atmosphere, encouraging users to maybe hold back themselves.
Exactly. Self-censorship is a key goal for authoritarian states. Surveillance measures, like Russia's laws preventing anonymous SIM cards or China's general policy of reducing online anonymity, they induce self-censorship. There's that anecdote from one source. A Chinese student in Australia criticized the government on Twitter. She then received a call from her father back in China, with Chinese authorities apparently present, asking her to remove the post.
Wow. And did she?
She complied. It's incredibly effective, that kind of pressure.
That's incredibly impactful, yeah. The next piece of this puzzle really illuminates how other countries are starting to, well, emulate these tactics, what does that look like on the ground?
We're seeing many autocratizing states adopting these tools, often copying legislation almost verbatim.
Yeah.
Countries like Azerbaijan, Nicaragua, Serbia, Turkey, Uganda.
Copying Russian or Chinese laws?
Yes. Nicaragua, for example, copied Russian legislation directly. Azerbaijan codified previously ad hoc censorship into law, expanding definitions of prohibited information to include fake news during crises. Uganda even levies a tax on internet data use, which acts as a significant deterrent for many people.
Are these countries just copy-pasting the laws, or do they face challenges implementing the same level of technological control?
That's a key point. Countries like Uganda and Nicaragua often lack the technical sophistication for the really advanced censorship, so they might rely more on simpler methods and internet shutdowns, arrests. However, China's influence through infrastructure projects is setting the stage for more sophisticated censorship down the line.
How so?
Well, China is establishing an extensive presence in Uganda's digital infrastructure through Huawei, for instance. One source even claims Huawei assisted the Ugandan government in penetrating the communications of opposition politicians. And a key takeaway from the sources is that timing matters. When you install a digital censorship regime, it's much easier to implement a comprehensive system when internet penetration is low, like it was in China early on. This implies countries like Uganda and Nicaragua with lower internet penetration now might be more susceptible to implementing a full China standard regime, compared to countries like Serbia and Turkey, where the internet is already more deeply ingrained in society.
Right, harder to put the genie back in the bottle.
Okay.
So connecting this to the bigger picture, how is the democratic world, particularly the European Union, responding to these increasingly sophisticated authoritarian models?
The EU really positions itself as a regulatory superpower. It offers a contrasting vision to both the more laissez-faire, tech-driven US model and China's state-controlled approach. Its framework emphasizes human rights, democratic values, ethical considerations.
And that translates into specific regulations.
Yes, comprehensive legislative frameworks. You've got the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation for strict data protection. That's the big one, everyone knows. Then the Digital Markets Act, the DMA, to curb anti-competitive practices by big tech. The Digital Services Act, DSA, for user safety, content moderation, and the AI Act, setting ethical AI standards.
So these aren't just rules for Europe. The idea is they have a global ripple effect, right? The Brussels effect.
Precisely. That term, coined by Anu Bradford, captures it perfectly. The EU's high regulatory standards often have this extraterritorial impact. They become global benchmarks. Why? Because companies often find it easier and cheaper to comply with EU standards worldwide rather than customize systems for different regions.
Makes sense from a business perspective?
It does. But despite these ambitious regulations, enforcement has been a major challenge. Processes can be protracted. Significant fines against major platforms like Meta, TikTok, Amazon, they've taken years to materialize. And the EU also acknowledges an innovation gap compared to the US and China. Some reports suggest simplifying regulations, but that could risk undermining trust.
A tricky balance. And what about the global south in all this? Are they simply forced to choose between, say, the EU model and the China model? Or are they forging their own path?
That's a really important question. The global south, including the expanding BRICS plus coalition, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, now others like Indonesia joining. They're playing an increasingly significant role. And while they often criticize Western hegemony and emphasize national sovereignty, they're definitely not a monolithic bloc. They don't necessarily want a purely China or Russia-dominated international order either.
So there's nuance there. How does it play out in terms of digital governance?
You see variety. Many countries, like Brazil and Mexico, have adopted data protection laws modeled after the EU's GDPR, but they often face huge challenges in enforcement, limited resources, competing political priorities, maybe a lower culture of privacy awareness sometimes. Then you look at India. Despite its rivalry with China, it has its own ambitious techno-nationalist agenda. Its data protection framework includes extensive exemptions for government access, and it might bring data localization back into consideration.
Right. And India is developing its own digital infrastructure, too.
Yes, its digital public infrastructures, DPIs, which started in the financial sector, are even being adopted by other countries, like Brazil. So the geopolitical landscape has shifted some global south countries closer to China and Russia, that's true. But the EU still has an opportunity, the sources suggest, to build diverse partnerships based on shared support for human-centric digital transitions, promoting alternative paths, like open digital public infrastructures, rather than just imposing its model unilaterally.
Okay, so with all this global context, digital influence, soft power struggles, different governance models, let's bring it right back home. Let's look at TikTok's surprising, maybe even paradoxical role in the US 2024 presidential race.
Yeah, it is fascinating, the paradox here. On one hand, you have mounting national security concerns from the U.S. intelligence community, explicit warnings about PRC attempts to influence elections through the platform, and President Biden signed legislation back in April 2024 requiring ByteDance to divest from TikTok by January 2025 or face a de facto ban. The Department of Justice is defending that law right now, citing a serious national security threat.
Right, so you've got all that official pressure, the legal battle.
Exactly. And yet, on the other hand, presidential candidates are heavily embracing TikTok, diving right in.
So despite the warnings, the potential ban, they're all jumping on the platform. How are they actually using it? What are the tactics?
Well, candidates like Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, they have multiple TikTok accounts, and they're deploying this unconventional toolkit. Memes, influencers, trending sounds, pop culture branding, all to amass millions of followers and gain credibility, especially among Gen Z voters. That's a demographic where, get this, 1/3 of adults under 30 get their news primarily from TikTok.
1/3. Wow. Okay, so give us specifics. How are Harris and Trump using it differently, maybe?
So Kamala Harris has a campaign account at Kamlock. It's described as brat-coded, very meme-driven, uses trending sounds, pop culture references, even got a shout-out from pop star Charlie XCX. Her personal account at Kamala Harris is more polished. Professionally filmed content from rallies, celebrity endorsements, uses empowering music like Beyoncé's Freedom or Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us.
And what does she say about the platform itself, given the controversies?
Harris herself has sort of walked a line, acknowledged both the very important benefits of the platform for reaching voters, but also the national security concerns. She advocates for a change in ownership rather than an outright ban.
Okay, and Trump?
Trump also has a personal account at Real Donald Trump. It's more dramatic, very influencer-focused, featuring Logan Paul, Jake Paul, lots of slogans, often using UFC fight imagery. His campaign account at Team Trump actually mirrors the more humorous, meme-driven style you see in the Harris campaign account. Kind of interesting.
Huh. And what about other candidates, like RFK Jr.?
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was described as the terminally online candidate by one source. He conducted a huge part of his campaign on social media, using TikTok for policy-focused content, live town halls, criticizing opponents, questioning Biden's health, for instance. And he's been quite dismissive of the national security concerns around TikTok's ownership, calling them a smokescreen.
And even the VP candidates got involved.
They did. Tim Walz joined with this Midwestern dad branding, quickly gained followers. J.D. Vance's account, in contrast, focused more on jabbing opponents, saw slower growth initially.
So the big question then, what does this all mean for the upcoming election? Does TikTok virality, all these memes and trending sounds, does it actually translate into real-world votes, especially for that Gen Z group?
That really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? This year's rush to TikTok is definitely redefining how political candidates interact with key voter bases, no doubt about that. But whether this virality actually converts into votes, that remains to be seen. Especially, as you say, in a segment of the electorate, young voters with historically lower turnout rates. But it certainly makes presidential politics an unavoidable part of the current digital calculus.
Absolutely. Well, today we've taken a really deep dive into this complex world of global digital influence. We've seen how China is leveraging bottom-up cultural phenomena, tech prowess, to project this cool image, while the U.S., according to these analyses, risks undermining its own soft power through actions against its own academic institutions.
Yeah, and we navigated the really intricate corporate structure of ByteDance, uncovered compelling circumstantial evidence of algorithmic manipulation on TikTok, apparently designed to shape user perceptions. And we observed how authoritarian nations seem to be exporting their censorship tools and techniques.
And we explored the EU's ambitious regulatory framework, the Brussels effect, the nuanced role of the Global South trying to find its own way, and wrapped up with that fascinating, maybe paradoxical embrace of TikTok by U.S. presidential candidates right in the middle of a debate about banning it.
So, considering all these different paths countries are taking in digital governance, from covert algorithmic manipulation on one end to strict human-centric regulation on the other, it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? How might your daily digital experiences, your perceptions, be shaped by forces you're not even aware of? And, maybe more importantly, what does that mean for the future of information integrity and individual autonomy in this deeply interconnected yet increasingly fragmented digital world? It seems our time for today is wrapping up.
We really appreciate you joining us for this deep dive.
It's always great having your input and thoughts.
But sadly, it seems we've run out of time for today.
Thank you so much for listening and for being such an engaged part of our podcast.
We always value your participation.
Until our next deep dive together.
Goodbye for now, and we'll see you next time.